Good evening. I told the world about 3 weeks ago that Coutts had closed my business and my personal accounts and had not given any reason whatsoever.
Nigel Farage is known for being an outspoken politician who has fought for decades for Britain's removal from the European Union. Despite achieving his life's goal when Brexit was voted for in 2016, Nigel Farage is back in the newspapers, this time for a very different reason. His exclusive private bank, the NatWest-owned Coutts, famous for managing the money of the royal family, has dropped Farage as a customer because of his polarising politics. As you can imagine, this has left Farage furious.
I simply couldn't believe the vile, horrible, vitriolic, prejudicial, literally every single one of the worst and often very wrong newspaper articles that's ever been written about me is there. And the way it's been written, he's not yet been convicted of anything. Well, that's nice of them, isn't it? It really was the most poisonous thing I've ever read about myself.
Coutts is a British private bank founded in 1692 that serves members of the royal family alongside some of the wealthiest people on the planet. It's owned by National Westminster Bank, otherwise known as NatWest, a high street bank in the UK. Nigel Farage is well known in the UK and is somewhat divisive in his political views. He is best known for the mobilisation of the Brexit vote
and, worst of all, the endorsements of this man.
The man behind Brexit and a man who led brilliantly the United Kingdom Independence Party in this fight and won despite all odds, Mr. Nigel Farage.
Yes, you've guessed it, the 45th President of the USA, Donald Trump.
He now finds himself at the centre of a bank account crisis. Farage received a letter at the end of June stating that Coutts had decided to stop doing business with him altogether as a commercial decision.
I expected the report to say, because I'm a politically exposed person, the costs of compliance are too great, therefore we don't want the account. That was what I expected,
Farage took to the news stating that his restrictions around a bank account meant that he was the equivalent of being a non-person.
I've been cancelled. I'm now a non-person. I don't exist. Do you realise?
He was offered a bank account at NatWest, the high street branch. However, he said that they only offered that to him as he threatened to go public, and it was unclear what services they would have offered. Then the BBC were briefed by the bank that his account had merely fallen below the £1 million threshold of borrowings or investments after paying off a big mortgage, and that it had nothing to do with politics, something that was later found to be incorrect.
A source from Coutts told their business editor Simon Jack that the reason my account was closed is because I fell below the financial threshold required to hold an account. Yet this document, which is from the 17th of November last year, which was the meeting at which the decision was taken I would be exited in 2023, this document proves that was wrong. And it starts by saying, my economic contribution to my bank account is sufficient to retain on a commercial basis. Are you watching this, BBC? This completely tears apart the lie that they were told.
Farage submitted a subject access request to Coutts, a way of finding out all the information that a company has on a person. This is more common now thanks to the new GDPR regulations in Europe. Farage received and published a 40-page document showcasing all the evidence collected by the Wealth Reputational Risk Committee, which said staff had been collecting data for months, with the key risks being financial crime linked to Russian connections, xenophobic, chauvinistic and racist views, his position on LGBTQ+ rights, and his friendship with Donald Trump, all of which were at odds with our position as an inclusive organisation.
Quote, the committee did not think continuing to bank Nigel Farage was compatible with Coutts given his publicly stated views that were at odds with our position as an inclusive organisation.
It's important to remember too that despite what you think of the man, Farage has never been charged with illegal hate speech.
Accepted that no criminal convictions have resulted, oh that's nice of them, commentary and behaviours that do not align to the bank's purpose and values have been demonstrated. The memos state at least 9 times that there is no evidence of links to Russia. They've even run checks on my transactions to make sure that's the case. And yet, Labour MP Sir Chris Bryant, using parliamentary privilege, his false allegations in the House of Commons are mentioned twice and are seen as a big risk factor in my debanking.
Farage then came out all guns blazing, criticising the NatWest CEO for breaching client confidentiality, as Dame Alison Rose had revealed that she was the source who gave the information to a BBC reporter.
Good evening to you. Well, as you've just been hearing, the CEO of NatWest Group, Dame Alison Rose, has within the last few minutes confessed she was the source of the incorrect story on Nigel Farage. She says, and I quote, "I recognise that in my conversations with Simon Jack of the BBC, I made a serious error of judgment in discussing Mr Farage's relationship with the bank."
Nigel Farage received apology letters from the BBC and the bank.
I got a letter this afternoon, which I was pleased to get, and it came from Deborah Turness, the CEO of BBC News and Current Affairs. And I'm going to put the letter up on your screen now. And let's go through what is significant. Made very, very clear that it repeated that the information turned out to be inaccurate. And at the bottom of that paragraph, she says, "I would therefore like to apologise to you on behalf of BBC News." Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Simon Jack. Thank you, Deborah Turness. I know some will say it took too long, but thank you. A fulsome apology from the BBC is not something that happens very often. I'm delighted to get it.
Many senior leaders rallying around Farage to provide greater transparency around bank account closures.
It wouldn't be right if financial services were being denied to anyone exercising their right to lawful free speech.
The whole story had been bubbling up so strongly that it was due to boil over at some point, and on the 26th of July, the NatWest CEO resigned, just 8 hours after admitting that she was the source of BBC's information. The BBC continued to suffer after a series of embarrassing stories that seriously damaged the reputation of the national broadcaster. But why does any of this matter? Some people might see this as a story that has got out of hand, but clearly it runs deeper than you think. Whilst no laws were broken, given that banks have discretion to decide who they bank with, banks are required to provide fee-free banking services to everyone. The surprisingly quick resignation from the CEO shows how damaging this has been to the reputation of the banks, as Dame Alison Rose was somewhat pushed following political pressure from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. The pressure is stronger in this case because NatWest is a bank that was bailed out in 2008, and so it's 38.6% owned by the British taxpayer, making the government the largest shareholder. Talk about an activist investor.
We need to find out what is going on in a bank that has 19 million customers and is 39% owned by us, the taxpayer, still.
But why this story is really important stems from the message that Farage is fighting for. Whilst Farage was not officially debanked, thanks to the offer of an account with NatWest, he is now fighting for the thousands of people who have been debanked in the past.
Don't underestimate me. I mean this. We are going to fight and get justice for all of these wrong people. I'm going to launch that website in a couple of days' time, and I'll ask anybody whose bank account has been suspended, whose bank account has been closed, to get in touch with me, and we're going to form a very, very powerful lobby group. We're going to get the rules on banking changed. We're going to get the politics out of banks and building societies. Don't underestimate me, just watch me over the course of the next few months.
Farage said himself that he's been rejected by 10 other banks since Coutts shut his account down. So it's an industry matter, not just a NatWest one.
And you can't live or survive in the modern world without a bank account. You become a non-person. Banking is now an essential service, just like water.
Lenders will now be forced to give 3 months' notice of account closures with full explanations as to why it's happening. Farage insists that he will keep fighting for Joe Bloggs to ensure that this doesn't happen to other people.
What I want to get to with this campaign, and I'm not going to rest, I want to get to the point that we used to have, where everybody in the country has a right to a bank account.
Some political commentators are suggesting that Farage might be able to spin this story into a political comeback after being out of the limelight for a few years, a springboard back to the big time. For now though, it remains to be seen whether Farage will sue any of the banks.
The truth of it is, they must have thought, look, we're NatWest, we're big, we're strong, we're powerful. I think they rather underestimated my determination on this.